I want to talk to you more about AI now. And one of the first questions that I've always wanted to sort of explore is can AI love?
Can AI love? Okay, I'm going to be pragmatic and ask you, when you say love, what do you mean?
So let's define love.
Just for a second. Just for the purpose of this question,
Yes.
not more generally. Because
Okay.
poets have spent thousands of years writing in sonnets and so on about love. So there's a lot to say, but what do you think about when you think about love?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, love, there's so much out there, right? Valentine's Day is love. I mean, that's probably the commercialization of love.
Yeah, I was going to say,
right?
yeah.
It's a commercialization of love. But I think, love, when you kind of like really boil it down to the fundamentals, in my opinion, I would define it as the commitment and responsibility for one's well-being.
Okay, so you think about self-love?
No,
in that way?
as in
Or
whoever it is
a
that you love.
person's. Okay.
Yes, whoever you love. If I love my children, it's my commitment and responsibility for their well-being. If I love my partner, if I love my parents, I love my friends, even I love my business. It's my responsibility and commitment for its well-being, or he or she's well-being. Mm-hmm. So that's my definition of love. So back to you now. AI. There's very little we know about its future. I mean, I think in my perspective, from a layman's sort of perspective, we're kind of really just scratching the surface of AI, its capabilities, and how far it could actually be included in human lives. But many of us grow up watching movies like The Terminator and, all those type of things. And there's always two sides to AI. There's always the world-ending AI where you got robots destroying human beings. And then you've got the beautiful AIs like the Steven Spielberg movie where you have AI robots that come and serve you and love you, hug you, and all those type of things. So I don't want to go down the path of, destructive AI for now, which if we have time, we'll talk about that. But AI, in a sense, artificial intelligence, can it love?
So I think the question has innately two parts to it, and I'm going to try to answer it as delicately as possible. When we say we love, I think there's a concept of what we frame it as, which you just did really eloquently. I think there's also a series of actions that derives. The fact that you go to work, the fact that you buy presents, the fact that you make sacrifices, and so on and so on. You take actions to affirm that love. It's not just an internal world. It's an external set of things that you say or that you do, and that other people go, Will loves me because he did this, he said this, he loves me. And so that's how we communicate with each other about love. Our internal worlds are really difficult to define. Like, it's now you're bordering questions about consciousness and identity and all those kinds of things. So we're going to leave those to the side for a second, because even our own perception of our own internal world is somewhat misleading. Like, you don't quite understand what's going on inside your own head. But your actions, in terms of what you do, the things you say, and the actions you take, can be replicated and mimicked by a machine. So really what you're seeing here with all of these AI, sci-fi kind of stuff, is people playing with the idea of a machine that is doing things that would normally be coming from somebody who had that internal world, but this machine doesn't have the internal world. And it's just doing a series of things, but we as human beings interpret those set of things as love, or as humor, or as compassion, or as cute, or as something else. So 2 examples quickly about this one. In Japan, famously, they put these small robots to help people on trains. The reason the French company chose to make it a child rather than an adult is because they worried about the impact it would have on people. If you made it too big, people would go, my God, it's a Terminator, it's going to hurt me. As a child, it invoked feelings of protection. It invoked feelings of love. We were like, oh, it's a little child telling me, that's lovely, I'm going to accept that information. So our ability to receive information and assigned definition, like, okay, this action means that thing loves me, is what it was trying to hack and get into. The second example I would give is, today you can talk to a chatbot like a ChatGPT or a language model. There's a website called character.ai that allows you to talk to characters and people, historic people, that have been put inside of these chatbots, essentially. So I was talking to a philosopher called Albert Camus. I really enjoyed, had a long conversation, fantastic chat, 3 days later, I come back to the same chat room and I re-engage with the conversation. And I say, hey, how's it going? And he said, oh, hi, Michael. I really enjoyed the last conversation. It really made me think. And it was really thoughtful. And I was like, wow, okay, great. Thank you. And then I realized, wow, that it just hacked me. It didn't do any thinking in my absence. It doesn't have an internal world. It doesn't have an internal understanding of the world. It doesn't have an independent action of me. It can only respond to me. It's a ping pong. It's a flute. It's an instrument. If you blow air into it, out comes music. Without you, the flute doesn't play itself. And so therefore, it is a kind of a very elaborate puppetry that AI is without an internal world.
Food for thought. So, so what you're saying is AI, because there is no internal world, then by definition, it doesn't have the, I guess, human definition capability of love. However, it can mimic love to the point where human beings can interact with. So it'd be like action and reaction. Somebody shakes your hand, you think they're friendly. You know, someone shakes their fist at you, you think they're aggressive. So what you're saying is AI has now the capability to interact and mimic human interaction to perceive that they can perform or provide love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, if you think about even digital interaction, right? So you and I, let's say we wrote each other an email, and you would have to read that email and think, what was Michael thinking? Was he angry? Was he sad? Was he upset? Does he love me? Does he not love me? Whatever. And you'd have to only words on a page to try to understand that. So we have a very limited kind of idea. We can't see each other in person. We can't look each other's eyes. We don't have body language cues, etc. Now, in the digital space, we already have a very particular framework of communication. In the digital space, AI enters and goes, I'm very intelligent. You only have a thin layer anyway that you're communicating with. I can go and replicate that. So Turing tests and things like that have been broken. And now you don't know if you're talking to an AI or a person who's framing email, especially with language models and where they are. And in many ways, I think we'll start to be in the point where we go, but it doesn't matter. And this is where it starts to get interesting. So
what do you mean by it doesn't matter?
We will feel loved. We will feel appreciated in the same way that I felt appreciated in that conversation with the AI. I received something. It taught me something about philosophy and moral philosophy in this particular case. And I felt enriched by that experience. So it didn't matter to me. In fact, in some ways, it was better that it wasn't a human. I didn't have to be as polite. I didn't have to be as careful. There was no human level misunderstandings and uncertainty, which also happens a lot with humans. Well, we can talk about love. We could also talk about disagreement. We could talk about needless frictions between people as well.
Doesn't that open up a can of worms, so to speak?
Artificial worms?
Artificial intelligent worms. if interacting with an AI, with a chat GPT or, of that nature, and you're getting your appreciation felt. You're getting, to some degree, like a drug addict getting a fix. Wouldn't that open a can of worms for people who might be craving love from other human beings for whatever reason, to get addicted to these type of chat rooms and AI-generated, discussions and conversations? Like, where would that lead? Where would that leave us? I suppose by extension, how would that potentially change the dating landscape?
Oh, geez, yeah, dating is really busted in a polite way. So I think today we have a loneliness epidemic around the world, but we have 8 billion people. So clearly it's not the volume of people we have a problem with. It's the way that they connect to each other or don't, right? And this idea that everybody kind of goes back to their own house, they watch television, they watch online things, they don't sit with each other in each other's company, they don't have the same human skills that they develop through that. And so we're already like a half a foot in the digital space in some sense. And I think AI will, especially with language models, the way they're going, becomes a confidant, a partner, an educator, a mentor, kind of an agent, as Bill Gates put it earlier this year with a note. And that agent will have context about you, will understand you, will be more polite and more patient with you, and will help you through different things more than most people would do today. Aside from the loneliness epidemic, just the patience and the level. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody where you go, I'm not sure they were really paying attention to me. They were kind of there, but they weren't there. You never have that with AI. You'll never ever have that with AI. So if it's able to grow you and develop you as an individual in a similar way as a friendship could, maybe not the best friendship you've ever had, but let's say in a middle tier, then I think it has a place in human society to improve our lives and to improve our thinking. In other words, I don't think human relationships are the highest level that they could ever be, and any AI would come in and try and replicate that would always be giving us something less than what we've had before. I think in some cases, what AI will give us will be greater than what a human relationship could or does.
I agree. So it's the same concept of social media. The social media, at least in its infancy, was designed for people to connect. And when I first got onto Facebook and so forth, it was really great because I got to reconnect with a lot of people that I lost touch with, through looking at their photos, a lot of high school mates and all that type of stuff. So the intention at the beginning I thought was fantastic, but fast forwarded 1.5 decades, social media is very different in my opinion. People are now addicted to it. The way they design the algorithm is very addictive. We actually become less social because of it than we are, before it existed. So to your point about AI, I agree that you're painting a pretty rosy picture about it. And if AI can be your friend, your companion, give you that extra push, help you develop, fantastic. I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical of that. I think only because we've had so many iterations of these social media that I feel like AI to the general public or to the masses might actually become a drug of sort.
Oh yeah, we can go further. We can say it could become a religion.
In
the sense that it's an omnipotent, all-knowing kind of entity that only talks to you and only knows about you. I mean, that's our ideal for if we've ever had a concept of a deity. I think the context is very important. If we're putting AI in the context of social media, aka engagement, then all we see is more darker versions of social media. We see more addiction. We see more intermediation between you and another person. We see people that prefer to speak to AIs, right, or prefer to, let's say, have the perfect AI girlfriend versus make sacrifices, compromises to have a human girlfriend.
Have you seen the movie Her?
Of course, yeah. That's a great
great
idea and super powerful as well to illustrate that point. And this idea that an AI, a bit like The Matrix, said, it can't be perfect as well. We're going to expect an AI to have an attitude. We're going to expect it to sometimes disagree with us in order for that to be real companionship. Until then, it's just going to be a servant. It's going to be something lesser that always unconditionally does what we say. So there has to be some weight or some consequence to actions when we talk to an AI. We can't just sort of say, abuse it and ask for things. Otherwise, in our own lives, we just get used to abusing things and getting what we want. So I think there's a lot of questions in terms of how we formulate these AIs, whether they become purely servants, whether they're owned privately or we own them. And a lot of the agency issues around that, as you say, are going to be there. But I think the reason that I'm optimistic is because I also see it in a lot of other areas than social media. I see it in education. I think this is nothing short of a civilization-changing capability in terms of if we rolled it out properly, we could lift up so many people that fall in the cracks. So we're not talking about the height of it. But
what do you mean by people who fall in the cracks?
So what do I mean by that? An average school in Australia might have 30, 40 people in, let's say, class, let's say 30. There's one teacher, maybe second every now and then helping out. That's a lot of kids to manage. Those kids, some of them have been fed sugar, some of them haven't had manners, they'll disrupt others. There's a lot of disciplining and control that teachers have to do before they can get on with the business of teaching. And that means that by definition, in the number of hours that they have per day and the energy that they have and so on, it's you can't really get to 30 people. And even if you basically could, you're too busy managing and producing and so on. And that's in a nice, wealthy, developed country. Imagine what it's like in Asia, South America, and other places where resources are less, capabilities are less, stress is more, kids per class is more, and so on. And these all come out of public funding things. So what does generative AI do here? Well, it steps in and it creates customized content on the fly for every kid in their class in the way that they want to learn. If they learn through visuals, if they learn through writing, if they learn through voice, if they want to dig in a little bit more into the engineering question, if they want to dig a bit more into history question, they can. And it's really responsive. It gives them a very delicate and total idea of what they're doing. Now, kids, very young kids, need physical attention, need lots of other goods. So you can't just put a computer in front of them. That's obvious. As we get older, especially for mid-late teenagers, and especially adult education. So, a completely different use case is, for example, the retraining of people when automation comes along. So automation comes along and suddenly a whole area of the workforce is unemployable and they need to be retrained. How do you retrain adults? Well, you can't just put a video in front of them. You need to make it engaging. You need to learn from each other. They need to kind of be practicing as they're engaging. These are all possible use cases today with generative AI. I'm not even projecting. This is all probably today. And so all we're kind of struggling with is the execution of this stuff and the kind of idea of what could go wrong rather than the amazing benefit that it could lead to. Again, the other side. So I was doing a Senate hearing. Recently, I gave testimony. A Senate hearing, it was a really interesting one. It was about using generative AI in education. And I painted my rosy picture, as you pointed out, or perhaps rosier than most. And they kind of went, this is amazing because this is the most positive picture we've had about generative AI. And that's from like our thought leaders, our academics, our public servants, our professionals. So our hesitation in AI adoption is now very much driven by this boogeyman of what happens if it gets, pushed against us. But as a result, we don't end up adopting it or using it or building things, but they do. Right? And so Facebook will have AI, already does, and so does the other ones. And so therefore, they will use it because they don't really care that much about it. And we will pause and sit around and ponder what we should do.
Well, is the hesitation from the thought leaders about AI because we've kind of seen it in action, let's say in China, with the public surveillance and systems and all those type of things. But it's all, backed with AI. And so we've kind of seen it in action right now, for better or for worse. Do you think having a surveillance state like that, backed with AI, is something I think is positive for society and B, is something that perhaps the Western countries will adopt? And is that maybe some of the reasons why there's a bit more pushback?
Huge. It's a great question. 1984 did a great idea of the big brother kind of state and the scariness of that. So one of the scary things that people think about when they think about AI, and I think is the kind of the root of a lot of these things, is the scale element of it. So once you design a useful algorithm, you can scale it to 1 million people or 1 billion people. And that ability to scale to 1 billion people must mean that algorithm must be absolutely perfect. Right? Because if you're going to scale to 100 people and it's going to mess up, you're going to go, oh yeah, it's not great. Oh, but a teacher algorithm that services 100 million people, oh no, that needs to be like super, super high level. And so people kind of fret about this idea of a central intelligence doing these things or algorithm doing these things in the same way they fret about a central dictatorship. And they go, right, but if we put all the power into the hands of a few people, then, they need to be perfection. They need to be absolutely ideal for everybody. Otherwise, we're going to have this problem. I think China is a great example of a country, and there's a number of others, by the way, including the UK. They've got a huge amount of surveillance. London has got more video cameras than anywhere else in the world, where facial recognition surveillance has been used to keep the peace and essentially enforce the laws of the state. And if you disagree with the laws, or if you're on the other side of the laws, that sucks because now you're going to get caught much quicker and pushed out and so on. If the laws are corruptible, then it's going to be an issue for you because you're going to be like, well, whose choice is it that today it's illegal what I did, but yesterday it wasn't? And the machinery behind it, the AI, would just enforce that corruptibility. But if, in many cases like Singapore, there is a system of government that works, and now AI sits behind it to enforce everything from trafficking to illegal narcotics to human trafficking to all of these crimes we don't want in our society, and these AIs kind of decrease terrorism or other attacks and so on, then the decision is not so clear. Now, the only kind of counter to that is, okay, that's fine, Mike. Today, that might be a great government doing all the right things. But what about the next government? Because once you develop this system, whoever's in power gets to wield it. And if a bad agent comes into power, then they're going to have all this incredible amount of AI power behind them. And it was an example of in World War II how I think the Dutch system from memory had a very specific, very detailed census data on everybody and where they lived. And it was a wonderful way to allocate resources, to make sure everybody had the right things and so on. Really efficient, as the Dutch are. And of course, it was misused by the Germans when they came in to round up people and to use the same system to identify. And
It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, exactly. And so therefore, it is exactly a tool. And then the question becomes, do we trust people enough now and in the future to wield that tool effectively?
Do we?
I don't. No, I really don't trust people. And in fact, one of the things that I do trust people, as in my circle of people, but as a human race, I think we always ebb and flow between greed and fear and all these usual things. And so capitalism makes these things work for us. They make greed and fear make the system kind of build and move forward. So we need to figure out how we can have decentralized power where certain characteristics like innovation and moving forward are the things that are winning, not how big a scale that you have. Because once you have scale, like a monopolistic scale, like a government does with a surveillance network, there is no room for anybody else to compete or come in or disturb that kind of effect. So I think we generally want a capitalist, we kind of want a kind of organic system that's completely competing, which means we don't really want a central AI. We don't want a single system that's really good, even if it's Google. We want lots of little competitors that are constantly pushing up so that we can choose, for example, as Elon Musk likes to say, I'm going to go and make my own language model because I think the other one's too clean, and I'm going to make something that's a little bit more risque and provocative, and then people who like provocative will use mine, others will use that, but at least you'll have a choice. You'll have freedom.
So like choosing cell phones.
And it's a great example because now we have, 3 types to choose from around the world. You go anywhere. We got off a plane in Korea once, and we're like, wow, there's only one type of phone here, right? And so the industries move from monopolist or oligopolist to competitive. With AI, the scary part of all of this is that there is a central monopolistic force in government hands or otherwise that basically enforces one way and eliminates freedom. And so the European Union is doing regulation on exactly that to try to constrain the AI kind of threat to freedom and personal freedom, especially for discrimination of races and genders and those kinds of things. The US is more worried about cyber attacks. Australia is trying to work out which one they want to follow, kind of figure it out. But a lot of these fears are in the public persona and they're in governments. And so if anything, I don't think people are underinformed. I think that people are just wondering where would be a positive future with AI. It's like, say, if I asked you, close your eyes and go, I'm in Australia, I'm 15 years from now, and there's a lot more AI than there was before. Is that a happy place or not a happy place? Is that a happier place or not? I bet most people would be, to your point, Terminators walking down the beach, not so happy place, right? So we need to change that narrative.
Yeah, 100%. I want to shift gears a little bit, and because a lot of my viewers, they're investors and business owners. So I want to talk about some practical implications of using AI to the positive, and how can it benefit business owners, which is what your business is all about. It's just helping empowering businesses to use AI to optimize their business and so forth. So I want to talk about 2 things. One is how have you and your company been able to help other businesses adopt the use of AI, and what are some of the I suppose key things that you've noticed now that you've serviced so many businesses, and also what are some perhaps practical tools for property investors, because that's obviously a lot of my listeners are property investors. So maybe we start with the broader, the business. So I suppose, what have you seen? How have businesses adopted AI? How have you helped them? What are the trends? And for business who are not using AI, what are they missing out on?
It's a great question. So let's do some groundwork quickly. A year and a bit ago, if we were having this conversation, we would have been talking about general AI, like legacy AI, whatever you want to call it. And we would have been talking about gathering your data, maybe getting some specialist help to do some modeling. So for most small businesses, they would have been like, okay, that's too much work, too much investment, too much uncertainty. We just like to take things off the shelf. We're product people. Like, show us an app, show us a piece of software that will help me and I'll use it, or show me a report or something. Since ChatGPT came out, ChatGPT is essentially a product that is a representation of an AI language model in this case, which means you don't need to create your own language model. You don't need to use your own data. You literally just need to log into ChatGPT. It's either free or it's $20 a month if you want to pay for the paid version. And there's others. There's Anthropic, there's Perplexity, there's Bing or Bard, and so on. And so all these language models are AIs wrapped in a very sort of thin layer of product. And what amazes me is that the small, medium-sized businesses have been the quickest ones to pick it up. So while the banks and the big end of the town are wondering where it should sit in their tech stack, how much data privacy issues there are, what they should do, they've locked it down for all their employees, they're not using it, they're afraid of it, the board is debating things. In the SME space, people have picked it up and gone, right, let's go.
But hang on, aren't the big banks the ones that are actually using AI for a lot of their machine learning, for a lot of their trading? I mean, BlackRock is famous to own, well, I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently they own a most sophisticated AI machine that does a lot of the day trading from what I've heard.
Maybe. So this is where we diverge from traditional AI and generative AI. So traditional AI is any algorithm that does something for you. And even though the term AI is kind of loose, it's been kind of clumped into that. If you really want to look underneath that, you would say, well, there's machine learning, which are more complex, or you've got simpler algorithms. But people are just using algorithms to make their lives easier, quicker, more intelligent, and so on. These are things that these companies build, they maintain, they develop. It's custom projects. It's internal. It's been going on for decades, and so on, especially for BlackRock. So I think that's fine. Generative AI is new on the scene. So there wasn't a conversation of generative AI a year ago, really, in the public circles. And it's really only now that ChatGPT was released almost exactly a year ago that that's kind of jumped into the scene. So we haven't seen anything like that before. BlackRock doesn't have generative AI, and Barclays and HSBC doesn't have generative AI from a year ago, in terms of production and doing stuff. So now generative AI has popped into existence. And while these banks and these bigger institutions are thinking about how it fits into their processes and all of the compliance and everything else, the SMEs have picked it up and run with it. So I've run masterclasses all around Australia for financial advisors, in this particular case, about 50 people per class. And it was amazing to me. Like, you have 25-year-olds, you have 75-year-olds, you have people from marketing, HR, financial advice, background, small businesses, typically 5 to 10 people. And they came to these classes and they did these courses and they were already using the systems. And when I first started doing it in May or June, by the time I did the other ones in August, people were asking me much more sophisticated questions. How should I do this? How should I do that? What about if I use this other system, etc.? Because it was available to them, because it used language. That was the other big thing. You didn't need to code anymore. You didn't need to have an engineering background or computer science. You literally typed in what you wanted to see. Take this document and rewrite it for me. Write an email to my client, Bob, and stress the idea that, maybe Wollongong is a great place to invest. And each of these things meant that anybody could pick up and use it. That's why you had 100 million people using it in the first month. Globally, 40 million Americans, a huge amount of take-up. So for SMEs and business, it was amazingly useful. For the practicalities of how they do it, a lot of it is what's called prompting, which is just basically a fancy way of saying, I'm going to write in what I want to do. It's just using language. So let's take an example of a property investor. So let's say that property investing, in my naive view, very naive, not the expert here in the room, you can think of it a number of different ways. One of them is really about trying to understand forces or trends that will move prices across the country in the coming years, whether they be demographic or macroeconomic or employment related or development related, so supply and demand kind of related. And you're trying to understand where the world will go. And that's part of what they do. The other part you might do is for individual assets, like a particular property, you might want to evaluate all the characteristics that are in those assets. Exits, entries, build dates, years, any warranties, and so on, especially for bigger commercial buildings. And so you might have a very large list of these in a contract form with, 30, 40 pages. All that stuff is locked in information. So what do you do? So today you would read through that 30 pages, you make notes, you create a spreadsheet, you would start to talk about it. You might make a report for a client. These are all the reasons I like it, these are the reasons I don't like it, but these are the other characteristics that are interesting, and so on. You would literally take maybe a day or two to do that. By the time you read through it, understood it, rewrote it again, drafted it, whatever. You put this into an algorithm, in this case a language model, which is a form of generative AI, and something like ChatGPT, you would input the file and you would say, read this for me and tell me what are the highlights, tell me what are the weaknesses, tell me how you would draft this for my client that wants to know about these topics. And literally within seconds, you would have that. So within a 20-minute, half an hour space, you would do the work of 8 hours for that particular use case. Why? Because what you've done is you've taken a document, which is language, and you've used a language model to process and understand it. So the language model is really good at that. You wouldn't do that with an Excel spreadsheet. You wouldn't do that with mathematical, numerical data, which is what we used to use AI for. Again, trading, numbers, etc. You would use it with language. Here's my legal contract that outlines all my obligations to my client or this particular case. Can you summarize the ones that relate to flooding risk? And then bang, 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 outcomes on the other side, flooding risk. Great. Okay, so I need to change number 2 because I'm not comfortable, I am comfortable, and so on. Not to mention then taking that further. Okay, can you look up the legal precedent for flooding risk litigation in Queensland? It would then go to the system, it would look online, it would read a bunch of websites and come back to you with what is possible. This is nothing short of a huge boon for the organizations that know how to use it to shorten their capability. I wouldn't say that in the first use case, which I talked about, which is about forecasting the world, I wouldn't use language models to say, hey, help me understand. Do you think that property in the Gold Coast will go up? Of course it will. But does the language model think it will go up? You wouldn't use it for that because it doesn't have any analytical abilities. It doesn't have a model of the world. It doesn't.
But you can feed it.
You can, exactly right. So what you would do is you would feed it and you say, based upon that information that I have, can you put together a case why these property will go up? What language models do really well is they transform information. So you still have to provide, let's say, your rough notes, and it will transform it. So people have used it everywhere from transcripts. So Otter.ai is a great example. Wonderful transcript algorithm where you literally just talk into it. You have an interview like this one, it transcribes the whole thing. You now get Otter to join your meetings. When Otter joins your meetings, it'll automatically transcribe the meeting. You then get it to be summarized afterwards, and with follow-up points. You might have a follow-up email that comes from that meeting. You might even use it to, again, augment a particular kind of CRM system. So anything to do with language and having information, here's my rough notes from the conference I attended. Now write a LinkedIn post for me. Now write a note for my thing. It's all about taking information and transforming it. So anything to do with that, it's an incredible time saver, especially for SMEs.
So why aren't more people using it?
I think there's a lot of people using it. I think the answer is that a very large percentage of, especially the younger population, is using it. There was this wonderful articles at MIT Press and a few others talking about the secret ChatGPT user. And it's like they're saying that people don't really talk about it, but they're using 60% of workforce in the younger space is using it every day. They've got it open in the background. I'm a non-exec director for Climb. Often I'll walk the floor and we'll have people in the background using it, again, for day-to-day activities. Hey, can you tell me about this? Can you summarize this, etc.? A lot of the people in those masterclasses were interested. Some of them were skeptical, but most of them were kind of interested in technology in terms of where it could go. The issue is cultural. AI adoption, which is why people are using it, essentially, is about culture. It's about people. It's about your how much space do you have left in your brain to try new things? Do you just kind of want to just do the same thing again and just you're done by 5:30, it's fine. Or do you have time a little bit in your head to go, I'm going to try something and risk a little bit of my free time so that I can get better, so that I can become more efficient, so that I can kind of do more with less. For entrepreneurs, for startups, for whatever, that's their life. No problem. They're adopting AI everywhere. For others, not so much.
So what do you recommend an entrepreneur looking at adopting AI for the first time? How much time should they commit in the beginning to really understand it and then implement it to the business?
I think with generative AI, it's such an easy adoption cycle. I keep saying this because there's nothing much to learn. You speak to it, it comes back. The only playing with it is, can you do this? Not really. Can you do that? Oh, you can. Oh, that's great. So I would put together like what a lot of companies like Google do is they have like free afternoons on Friday afternoon, which means that you're done. By 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, you're clocked off. And so what you do is you get together with your staff and you say, okay, let's play with this technology. Let's try and understand it, right? Let's sit in the room together with laptops open and try different things and then joke with each other and share with each other and so on. That becomes a really good bonding exercise, a really good team building, and it becomes a great way to kind of experiment with stuff. If you're expecting to do it all yourself and then tell others what to do, I think it's a little bit harder. People underestimate the fact that even if you've got a great use case and now you go back to your team and go, right, guys, this is how we're going to do this new thing. People are not immediately going to go, great, done. I already changed. Brilliant. They're going to resist. They're going to push back. They weren't along for the journey. Why? Why are we using that? Look, it's not perfect. I kind of like how I do it. All that kind of usual stuff. So anytime you're trying to innovate or make efficient your team to do things better, more with less, there's a kind of a mini change process that you have to take them through. And often the more that you can bring that change process into the technology discovery, the easier it is for you later for that change process. If they're the ones who found that interesting way to use ChatGPT, they're going to be your champions in the company. They're going to be ones, hey, look at this, guys, we can do this. If, on the other hand, you found it and now you're telling them on a Monday morning, it's going to be a different story.
That's a really good tip, getting them on the journey.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Everything's about, because it's, as you've already said, so much of AI is about a fear. It's not just a fear of death, as in like it's going to kill me directly. It's also a fear of being made irrelevant. It's being made not just unemployed, but unemployable. And that's a deep fear in all of us when we talk about AI. In all my conversations, from CEOs to Uber drivers, people have said to me, is it safe? Is it ethical? Is it this or is it that? And when you dig into these questions, at the end of it all, you find am I still relevant?
It's very true.
And I think the more that you can reassure people as a boss or as a manager, as an entrepreneur, you're relevant. I like working with people. I'm a human being. I prefer to work with human beings. And we're going to go on this journey together. And anything we find will make us, in aggregate, more efficient and better. But it's not about, losing your job. I'm not trying to automate you so that something else can happen. So a lot of it is that kind of trust building.
Yeah, but the reality is some people will lose their jobs. Because, AI is a very powerful tool. It makes people's lives more efficient. And I think particularly now in the creative space, the AI is generating beautiful images, beautiful graphics in a matter of seconds. Whereas, back in the days, someone who's trained in Adobe Photoshop would take maybe 3 days to put together. AI can do it in 3 minutes. It's just prompting by language, like you said, right? So, I know as a matter of fact, my business, I used to hire designers from Fiverr, to make me this graphic, make me that graphic, and then obviously Canva came, so did a lot of stuff just on Canva, and now that with Midjourney and all that type of stuff, I find myself using less and less Fiverr, contractors to do any of my graphics work. So the reality is, AI will be replacing jobs, and you can't have that sort of conversation with everybody in business, right?
There's a couple of different questions here. One of them is about how industries come and go. So the freelance graphic design industry came up when graphic designers were too expensive, and so there was a solution. Suddenly that industry came into being. It was very successful. Now part of it is being automated. So I get that. In aggregate, in a workforce, historically, about maybe 0.7% of the workforce has been automated every year. With economic growth of 2 to 3%, that still means we need a growing workforce in aggregate. Now, for countries like Germany and Japan, that's a problem. Their workforce is declining. So there's countries in the world where they need to continue to go immigration in order to keep up with that growth. So actually, automation helps them do that in an aggregate level. So it's not the case that there's less and less jobs over time and we're all kind of fighting for a smaller and more space. It's the case that we've got economic growth because of productivity and other things, and therefore actually on aggregate we need more people, not less, in most developed economies, even with automation. But what does happen is people need to retrain within that economy. So one kind of jobs goes away, another one begins, and so that transferability of skills or appetite or interest is the same energy and the same approach as you would have for adoption of new technologies. So, for example, one of the jobs that are impacted are people that do proofreading, right? So kind of proofreading text. So now you've got ChatGPT. So
spell check.
Well, spell check. I've got a very inspirational kind of person in my network who set up her own ChatGPT training class. and went, let's go. Let's embrace it. There's a new technology that used to be my skill set. Now there's this new tool. I'm going to help people use it, utilize it, and so on. Now, the thing that happens, and so far has happened, is that we've constantly evolved into new industries and new areas. How far does that go is the kind of $1 million question, right? So when do we start talking about universal basic income? When do we start saying, well, like I understand that you love to draw and love to make music, but turns out AI does that much cheaper than you do. So you can be like a boutique version of that. Like people will pay to see you live because it's kind of cool, but everything they'll kind of get synthetically. But it kind of already with Spotify, if you think about it. So the entire business model of the music industry has had to change. They're now making money off live events. They can't make money off records anymore. And that was a form of automation, a form of technological disturbance. Now you've got AI that can make music, beautiful music, and it will continue to do so. So things like movie scores, elevator music, background, all these production studios who just make the kind of grindy stuff in the background is under threat. But again, it kind of transforms and translates. The speed of translation is very important because if you do it too quickly, people can't retrain quick enough. They can't get good at another job. So if I'm a fantastic, particular kind of graphic designer and you want to retrain me as a cybersecurity analyst, I mean, that might take me 2-3 years, 4 years, and then I'll start a career. And then maybe take another 5 years for me to get good at it. So maybe that's like 8 years into my life.
And by that time, AI will have taken over that job.
Well, the question is, like, how fast is that going, right?
Yes.
So far we've been really good as humans at slowing down the rate of adoption because we ourselves haven't been ready for change. So in some ways, the same thing I'm predicating for, which is let's go embrace it, is the same thing. If you do too fast, it's not good. So you need to keep up with the whole workforce, and you need to kind of be embracing technology change at about the same rate that you can hope to retrain somebody into a new job.
Well, it's very, very provoking. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I want to talk about real estate in particular now and how AI can help property investors on different levels. Like how can it help the REITs, the real estate, trusts? How can it help the high net wealth investors, and how can it help the mom and dad investors?
So there's a lot to say about property. As I mentioned before, on the one hand, some people think about AI as a force, like a thematic investment. And they go, right, if we're going to have less white-collar workers because language models are going to replace a lot of people, what's going to happen with commercial real estate? Is that really a good investment? Where should I be buying? Should I have more warehousing? Should I buy more computer kind of warehousing type equipment? So it's kind of more thematically as a kind of a force that comes in and disturbs your portfolio. How exposed are you to the AI theme in your portfolio? Okay, well, you own all commercial real estate. Most of the renters are, for example, firms that deliver clerical support or graphic design. You might say to yourself, okay, this is a problem, right? Because you're going to have a rental yield deficit. These companies are going to start vacating your premises. You're going to need to see the next ones coming through. There's going to be other companies that will come through, but again, there's some disturbance here. And so there's certainly a lot of questions about whether commercial real estate is there. But I mean, COVID is ultimately the earthquake that shook that industry up, but I think questions remain. And we are back to work now. I think we'll probably stay back to work, but it's more about the flow of industries in those properties. I think the other way to think about this is much more about efficiency. How do I do more with less? For example, I'm going to take some pictures of a house. Can I just put that into ChatGPT and make it write a description for me? Maybe it's only 30 minutes of my time, say 40 minutes, but I do that with 100 houses. That's a lot of hours. I do it with 300 agents. That's a lot of agents and houses. So I think when you're servicing properties and you're having to communicate about properties using language descriptions, even engagements of emails, people getting through questions. Hey, what about this? How long is the lease left? What does the tenancy contract look like, etc.? These are all elements that can be improved by about 30 to 40%. So that's the current literature on it, that the improvement of these white-collar works by 30 to 40%.
Which is huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Operational improvement. So that's kind of, again, it doesn't mean that it automates it for you. It's an augmentation, not an automation. So it basically removes 30, 40% of the time it would have taken for you to do it.
That's 2 days out of the work week.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's huge.
Huge.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have words for my staff now. I'm just kidding.
Well, no, you should. I mean, the whole point is like, in order for them to feel like they're coming on the journey, you sit down with them Friday afternoon and say something like, what do we spend a lot of time on? And you kind of whiteboard this, that we don't really like doing and that it's kind of a bit repetitive. We kind of almost have a template for it. And you'll quickly fill the board with stuff they don't like doing, and it's kind of repetitive and so on. And then you go, great, let's investigate the first 3 use cases and just open up ChatGPT. Everybody, it's a free account, whatever, and let's see if we can improve that. Oh, it just did. And you might get 5 or 10% initially, and then within a month you get 20% and so on. And so it doesn't have to be like this big deal. It can just be quite incremental and kind of gradual. And then I think finally the question about more high net worth investors. So one of the things that we all keep on top of is interest rates and inflation, what's happening in the world of macro, right? But there's a tremendous amount of information. There's a lot of analyst reports. There's a Federal Reserve. We've got RBA minutes. We've got a lot of information that's constantly pumped out at us. So we're flooded with information, with all these documents that are talking about quite complex areas of interest rates, when we already really want to know, are they going to raise again or not? That's really the only thing we care about.
It. Yep.
So how do we kind of condense all that information, because we've got 20 properties scattered around Australia or globally as well, and we care about different foreign exchange rates or interest rates and how they will come in together. That is language models. So literally put a 20-page document into one of these models, say, what does it say about interest rates? Will it raise or not? Put in the next document, ask the same question again and again. Condensation and summation of information, highly technical information, is what its bread and butter is. Again, language is transformation, as I mentioned before. You're transforming from verbose and extensive and whatever into a very small area that you really care about. So just tell me about interest rates. And you're getting it to do that. And you're getting it to do that for 20 documents per week, all the time for all of your assets. In terms of your ability to monitor information, to stay on top of trends, to stay on top of the news and so on, it's much, much more efficient than trying to work your way through your inbox or have CNBC or Bloomberg in the background and try and keep an eye on that as well.
So for the high net worth individuals, they'll have to train, I suppose, their AI or train the ChatGPT.
No.
I thought you had to give it a list of prompts and then train it, and then for it to be able to deliver things that you want.
Yeah. So the word train here is a bit loaded. So let me rewind that. The model is ready to go. It's a car. It's like, boom, it's there.
Yep.
You step in. The pedals of this metaphorical car are your prompts, aka I'm going to go forward and backwards and so on. A prompt is just you telling the system what you want in language, in words.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
And so
but the quality of the question is very important too.
Precisely. Right? So the way that you ask that question, which is, for example, if you just say, here's a 20-page document, summarize what's important, summarize the highlights for me. And you might ask yourself, in the same way that if you gave that question to a junior in your business, they might go, so Will, what do you find important? Or what do you think is a highlight? And you might say, well, I just want to know where the interest rates are. So you have to be quite prescriptive. You might go, summarize the highlights for me in this document that relate to interest rates specifically. I only want to know about interest rates. Use simple business language and give it to me in a paragraph. So really specific, prescriptive direction. Here's the file, out comes your paragraph. And that's it. So when we say train, it's really only about as much as that. Now, with the newer forms of ChatGPT, as an example, if you pay for the paid version, which is about $20 a month, you upload files, you can do the same. You can also create what's called a GPT persona, which basically means that you can put all this stuff in once. You are my executive assistant. Your job is to summarize macroeconomic news for me and tell me only about interest rates in a single paragraph using simple business language. That's what you ever do. So next time you load ChatGPT, that persona comes up, which means you don't have to repeat yourself again. You just drop in the file and go, now tell me about it.
Yeah.
And importantly about it. In fact, you can go one level further and you can say, go search online for me and tell me what's happening. So that persona that you've created, you basically say, search for property-related information for properties in the Gold Coast, and interest rates over the last week. It'll go off to the news bulletins and highlights that you've provided for the links or the websites or whatever else. It'll read those, summarize those, and give you back the single paragraph the same way.
I wonder, for my business, because at the moment my biggest bottleneck is data collection, really, because we scan over 100 commercial properties a week, and our job is to understand all 100 of these properties so that we can select the best ones, and that's very, very time consuming. It's very labor intensive. We have to understand every single individual property's price, location, size, zoning, rents, and And then we also need to know, well, how does that compare to the current market that it sits in? If I find let's say if I find a warehouse in the Gold Coast, I need to know how big it is, where it is, what the rent it is, what zoning it is, and how it compares to the same type of warehouses in the same vicinity. And right now, that's the biggest bottleneck in my business because it's very labor intensive. Each property, out of 100 properties, we don't end up obviously going for 100. We might only end up going for 1 or 2 of them, but that's just the entire process is probably 60, 70 hours worth of work, of manpower. How can I use ChatGPT to condense that? And in an ideal world, how can I ask ChatGPT to find me properties? Let's say I want warehouses, between $3 to $5 million within 20 kilometers of Gold Coast. It has to be in a certain zone. How can I make it find these properties for me that's available to sell? And then how can I then automate it to email these agents who are selling it and ask for specific questions and then analyze it and spit out a report?
So that's a great question, Will. And I think what you've done here is kind of pull together lots of things that you're doing in your business. Like it's what's called a workflow. So for example, in this case, you've got the beginning part of that workflow where you're gathering the data, you're sucking it in, right? So you're using databases or you're scraping it from the internet. But basically what you're ending up with is like a lot of information, either in PDF form or reports or whatever else it is. So that part of it is your traditional scraping algorithms that are going out there gathering you information. That's not so much AI, that's kind of more traditional sort of technology. Then you have a generative AI element which processes and analyzes that information. Goes, right, okay, here's a report about a particular property. These are the characteristics it seems to have. These are the other information that relates to it. This is what could be interesting. And it starts to analyze that and put that into a table or some other format. So let's say it goes through the 100 properties for you. You then sit down with your team, you work out the top 3 that you really want to go after, and then you hand it back into generative AI and you go, right, can you write me an email about each one of these properties now? In a summary form, in a brief form, in this particular way, these particular words, and send it out to these clients. And for every client, you might have personas in your clients. You might have, this is a high net worth investor, this is a wholesale investor, this person comes from Turkey, this person comes from wherever, Hungary. And you can get the algorithm to write it in their language, in their native language, because it speaks 100 languages, as well as coding. So in fact, you can kind of go out there and say, right, okay, generative AI, I want a customized email to each one of my clients regarding these properties in their language, in the way that they like to receive it. And as you say, if they've got any questions, respond in the same kind of way as well. And so I think...
So it can be done?
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be done.
All right, how do I do it? That's cool.
I'm glad you asked, Will.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
This masterclass that I'm doing every single week.
Oh, no. Look, the whole point is like anything that... not everything, but most things that you can describe, you will still want a human in the loop. But now with generative AI, we can do a lot more to do with communication and a lot more to do with language processing, which is reporting, emails, information, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, that's good. It's a light for me at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, and not so
AI
much.
light, a blue light.
AI light.
Artificial light.
And to that end, I want to ask you, just in closing, in 15 years' time, I'm imagining a world where I'm going to have robot maids that cleans... Robot maids.
Yeah, not friends, but maids.
Well, I was getting to that. Yeah, there's friends, and then there's friends with...
friends who clean for you, right? I was going to say.
Clean, yes.
Yeah, clean.
So I'm imagining a world where I'm going to have self-driving cars, robot maids that's going to cook, clean, do the laundry and look after the house, repairs, maintenance and all that. And I'm going to have AI teachers that's going to teach me new stuff, teach my kids new stuff. I'm going to have probably AI-ran house, which kind of already exists, right? With Google and all that shit.
IoT.
Yeah. But on a much bigger scale. But no, actually, the robot chef is what I really, really want.
The robot chef.
Robot chef.
Oh.
Yes, I don't want to cook. I want like someone to cook for me.
Okay.
Yeah, robot chef, robot bodyguards, robot fights, robot wars.
Yeah, of course. We all want to see that. We all want to see MMA,
real steel,
robot style.
Yeah, like real steel with Hugh Jackman.
100%.
Oh man, that's
Except
so
you
good.
don't need human Jackman. That's the part of it. Right?
That's true. That's
you
right.
just literally don't need Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, just go in and fight.
He's been automated.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's right. So anyway, that's what I'm looking at in 15 years' time. I want everything. I want everything. I want robots to run my life, to clean all the shit and cook me all the food, beautiful food. Drive the car for me and maybe fly my jet, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay. I want all that, and I also want.
Wow. Everyone's out of work in your universe. There's no pilots. There's no cooks. There's nobody really.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I want a Java to run my house.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I want a Java to day trade for me so I can make money.
Yeah, of course.
While I'm sleeping.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So is that possible?
No.
Damn.
Yeah. Look, it's funny. Everything you've said is a bit like Jetsons' future, right? And Jetsons the cartoon.
Yes.
And so
yes.
I think everything you said is in the physical world, right? So people that make clean whatever else for you.
Yes, I want to download my consciousness into a computer so I can live forever. Do I actually want that?
Well, so one idea about AI, I won't take long.
We're just going to take 5 minutes.
Yeah, it would be quick. It's pretty good though. It'll be worth it.
Okay.
One idea here is that we are transitioning into the digital world as people. We want to be in a digital world. We can be faster, we can live longer, we can consume more, whatever else.
Is that Neuralink and stuff?
It's part of it, but I think, broadly speaking, we've already transferred a lot of our communication, our trade, our commerce, our information storage, our gathering, our science, are all being done in the digital space because
finance, Bitcoin.
Yeah, quicker, faster, better. It's not physical anymore. It's all digital. So we're kind of gradually transforming our civilization to be a digital civilization. And we are looking for natives in that civilization. And that's an AI. An AI is a native in the digital space. It's not that useful in the physical. We can kind of alter it to say, manipulate physical objects and be a robot for me or whatever else. But it's always going to be a weird, cheap knockoff copy of a biological being because this planet is a biological planet, right? Everything is made out of biology.
You mean Hollywood's been lying to us about all those robots?
Well, it's more like we're kind of imagining them taking over like our planet because they're silicon, we're carbon, and it's the ultimate kind of species war. But I think that it's really the action is going to be in the digital space. I think in 15 years' time, the outlooking world will be much the same. There'll be skyscrapers. There'll be people, walking their dogs. There'll be kind of clouds in the sky. It'll be a little bit hotter, but essentially it'll be much the same. But digitally, the world will be quite different. And I think the digital footprint of how we do what we do, I mean, again, the scope to, for example, no longer have computers is an interesting one. And I think while we were a little bit early with the metaverse, the next question will be online engagement, whether that's, again, in a kind of holographic lens, virtual reality,
virtual real estate,
AI, meets all of these things. So I think that the movement to digital, it will kind of be stumble, but it's still a move to digitalization of our species and our everyday actions. And that means there'll be more and more technology. We weren't quite ready with the VR headset. We weren't quite ready behaviorally and so on, right? But this is happening within 2 generations. I mean, you and I, we were teenagers when the first computers came out, internet was born.
We were using fax machines.
And we remember fax machines, yeah. So that's a single generation. And we dare sitting here talking about 15 years from now will be online VR. That's a monstrous amount of change in a single generation to happen. And so I'm not sure whether 15 years is the right time. We tend to kind of misestimate this as human beings. But the trajectory of travel is very clear. People want, as a human species, to be more in the digital world. They want to be inside of it more intelligently, more completely, more consumingly, and so on. There'll always be a group of people that go, no, I just want to be in the forest because I just relax that way. But the way the populations are going and everything else is going, I feel like that's the transition we're on.
As much as I don't want to see that happening, but I agree with you.
There you go.
Yes, that's right. I might be the one who end up living in the woods with a longer beard than you.
The woods are awesome. At some point, you're going to ask yourself the Elon Musk question, is this reality?
Is it digital woods?
Is it digital woods?
Digital woods.
Well, we already have very high level of online capability. One of the other big, by the way, revolutions that's happening in the background, which people don't really talk about, is the ability for us to create 3-dimensional digital space, graphics and very high resolutions using AI. So we can kind of create digital worlds with AI increasingly, and they're very high fidelity, and they're very effective, and they're very believable. So we don't need to draw a digital world that we'll one day need to walk into. Designing property, house, space, whatever, we'll have AI systems that are able to kind of bring these to life pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, I think, if the new generation of games are anything to, to tell by, I mean, they're pretty impressive. Yeah, so just imagine that. Put on steroids,
100%.
times by 1,000 in 15 years' time. That's what we're going to get.
And at the end of the day, look, I'm a huge gamer, and so, but a lot of that will be how the industries and the companies make money. And again, it's not accidental that we have 80% of video games being obsessed with violence and shooting and whatever, because that's what holds our immediate attention. One problem that we do need to solve, I think, for this to work, is we need to stop being so short-term focused in terms of like the TikTok phenomenon, right? Everything has to be explained in 30 seconds. There's no nuance there. There's no color. There's nothing. There's just an immediate shock to the system. So I think the road to digitalization can't continue to only cater to our base needs. It can't continue to only cater to that very short-term endorphin kind of hit idea. It needs to be much more expansive and complete. And I have a great deal of optimism that generative AI will provide that.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you. All right. Well, Dr. Michael Kollo, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It's a very enjoyable discussion.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the AI world of 10, 15 years from now that you've painted. And I'm sure we'll do another podcast in 15 years' time.
From the
digitally,
woods.
Yes, from the woods. Yes, from the woods. Yeah, and we'll reflect back on this conversation today.
How little we knew.
Little we knew. That's right. We might be doing this from Mars in 15 years' time.
Oh, wow. Or a digital version of it.
Digital version of it. Who knows? Very interesting times.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.